Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and we're back with another license frame. This is a day later than normal, but I have a new cat who may join us during this video. So, if you like cats, be on the lookout. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about probably one of the best sniper mechs in the game, and that's going to be the Death's Head license. The Death's Head is a very interesting mech that is probably one of the most accurate mechs in the game, which is very good, and it makes it a very solid damage dealer at a range, which is why it is a artillery frame. Up here, yeah, there you go. Artillery frame that specializes in long range sniper damage. But let's take a look at the death. I also like this one, though, to be fair, the legs make it a little weird. Not gonna lie. I don't know why they have such strangely feminine legs. Like, look at them thighs. So, whatever. Hey, I'm not judging anyone here. I'm just saying it's a very strange mech, but let's look at what the Death's Head has to offer. All right, so as we can see here, this mech has less armor than average, though I would say there's plenty of mechs that have 0 armor, so that's not a big deal. This mech does have the average HP and a higher than average evasion with a low average E defense, which is pretty good. The high evasion is actually really good, and there's a lot of ways you can actually put agility into your build to make this mech very frustrating to deal with at range, because not only is it super accurate, but it also is very evasive as well, making it a pain in the ass to deal with for most enemy mechs. So something that I would definitely look at, don't ignore your evasion when using this particular mech, as it, or your agility specifically, as this mech is actually insanely good at staying out of range and out of harm with its high evasion stat. And it actually has a pretty decent speed, which we'll get to in a moment. Now, its heat capacity is also actually pretty good, I think, on the higher end of average, give or take. Yes, the higher end of average. Its sensor range is massive. It's 20. I don't think there's another one that is higher than 20. There might be a 25 one. So pretty much the max sensor range you can have. So if you want to build tech into this particular mech frame, it works insanely well, and you're going to want to for some of its systems. As well, it has a very low repair capacity. This is something that's very common with mechs that have a higher than average evasion. You want to avoid taking big hits as much as possible. So, repair capacity is something you need to be very cautious of. And I don't know if it's worth the engineering, I think, to get more repair capacity. So, be careful while using the Death's Head. It is a bit of a glass cannon mech. Now, its save target is average, and its speed is the higher end of average. But if you go into agility, like I said before, to boost its evasion, this mech can actually get pretty fast if you go down that line, making it very easy for it to reposition and set itself up for success on the battlefield. Now, its system points is just a little bit below average, but that's okay because these traits right here are nuts. So, first we have Neuralink. The first time it makes a range attack roll each round, it can re-roll it, but it must take the second result. That's insanely good, especially because fumbling, like botching in this game, is not really a very major thing. So honestly, there's very little risk. The only problem is you could get greedy if you're banking on a crit. You could cause yourself to miss. But if you're looking just for hit accuracy, Neuralink is going to make it so that your mech is going to hit, honestly, more often than not, which is insane. That, along with perfected targeting, which is also nuts, gives you an additional +1 to all ranged attack rolls. This is not a +1 accuracy. This is a +1 to what you roll on the dice, making it capable of being stacked with accuracy. But more insane than that, there's very few things in the game that just give you a plus to an attack roll that isn't your just base attack bonus. So that being the case, The Death's Head is probably the most accurate mech in the game, or at least when making ranged attacks. So this is going to be a really good mech if you enjoy the various guns in this. And this license also has some really good guns in it, which I can't wait to show y'all. But yeah, so I'm very, very excited for what this particular mech has to offer on the battlefield. It's honestly, I wouldn't say one of my favorites, but when I've been looking over it, it's a really good mech, honestly. All right, looking at the mounts here, we have 2 mounts, which is a little bit less than normal, but even then, there's a good amount of mechs in the game that have just 2 mounts, so that's okay. And it actually has one of my more favorite configurations. This is a heavy mount with a main aux mount. This is a really good setup for most mechs, as main aux allows you to slot in a main and an aux weapon on the same mount. And heavy, there's a lot of really good heavy long distance weapons. So there's some very good ways you can do this. And there's even a way you can get, I believe, an additional main mount or an additional flex mount through core bonuses. That being the case, you can kit out your Death's Head to have tons of guns, which I think is really good. But honestly, these 2 mounts might be the only thing you need, as with a full barrage, you get 1 heavy and a main aux firing at the same time. You can do a lot of damage just with that. So honestly, I think this is a pretty optimal setup. So in addition to this, we have its precognitive targeting. Let me go ahead and hide my beautiful face here so you can see everything it has to offer. So its active effect is neural shunt, and you activate it as a protocol. So essentially, at the beginning of your turn, you activate it, and then any turn for the rest of the scene, you can mark a target for death. When you do so, you choose any target within range 30, which is massive, but they can't be within range 5. So this has the same kind of issues that the Barbarossa has, where it creates a dead zone for it within close range, meaning you're going to want to do a lot of things to make sure that the enemies are not capable of getting close to you. Now, while you're focusing on this enemy, you become immobilized and you can't take reactions, which is pretty massive, honestly. That will make your mech pretty vulnerable in a lot of situations, and it prevents you from using some of the funner talents in the game. But when you do so, you deal bonus damage based on the weapon size. So aux weapons do an additional d6, main do 2d6, and heavy or larger do 3d6. And on range critical hits against that target, but this bonus damage only applies on ranged critical hits. So that is going to be a thing where the whole point of this mech is to get critical hits, which, if you are unaware, are any results over 20, including bonuses, on the dice. So you want to get as much accuracy as you can, and you want to use the perfected targeting to get that +1 bonus. Now, the bonus damage also only applies when they aren't in cover or within range 5. Now, what's interesting is this doesn't say that you can't fire on targets closer than range 5. You just can't focus on them when they're within that range. So even if an enemy does get close to you, you still can shoot them. You just don't get the benefits of Mark for Death. Now, you may only focus on one character at a time, but you can cease focusing on one as a protocol, meaning that you can set yourself up. The one thing about this one in particular that I am not a very big fan of is the fact that Mark for Death is a full action, which means the same round, unless you're overcharging, you're not going to be firing. So this is a huge amount of setup for something that only benefits you on crit. Now, the damage benefits are huge, don't get me wrong. Even the 1d6 on the aux mount is enough to do a significant amount of damage to mostly unarmored targets. Though, if you get armor-piercing rounds, this becomes even more devastating. So the way I would pretty typically use the precognitive targeting, and this also takes benefit with its higher heat cap, is you're going to want to use your active bonus and overcharge in the same round. Now, this mech isn't necessarily one to use a bunch of overcharge unless you're really trying to, destroy someone in a round. So hopefully it's only at your first or second overcharge that you're using your additional shots on for Mark for Death. And Mark for Death lasts until the end of the scene. So as long as that target is alive, every round after that, all your shots are going to have this critical effect on them. This is not a very good core bonus. You're obviously not going to want to use this a whole bunch. That's kind of one of the issues I have with it. The damage is good, but the fact that it's only based on criticals and only when enemies don't have cover, when cover is so common in this game, it makes it a little bit rough. Now, I will say specifically that it doesn't matter what guns you're firing. So, Mark for Death is actually not that bad when you're using cannons or anything that has like arcing or the like, as that can get over cover real easy. So, with that being in mind, this is a lot more useful. It's not just for sniping. Don't get your super set on it. This can affect any kind of weapons you're utilizing. Technically, not melee, but it can affect anything but melee as long as its range is longer than 5. So pretty good in some situations, but it's very crit focused. So I guess I'm just kind of rambling on. It's a pretty good mech. Overall, the Death's Head is really cool. I really like it. Stat-wise, I think it suffers a little bit. The good sensors and good evasion are its main factors in its stat line. Nothing else is very remarkable. So it feels a little undertuned for its frame traits, but or for its attributes, sorry. Its traits, though, are goated. So this mech is a very solid mech for a large variety of artillery play and long distance play, which I think it suits in with very well. It also works really well with the Barbarossa's, the like tripod effect it has, where you can set yourself in and increase your range by 5 feet, or five hexes, not 5 feet, which is really good and can help this mech, who's already going to get stationary anyway when it uses its core bonus. So using that feature, which it's called the, what's it called? I can't remember. Siege Stabilizer. Siege Stabilizers will extend your range by 5, and since you're already going to become immobilized anyway, there's really no reason not to use it. So that's my recommendation. Let's take a look at the first rank of this license. All right, high stress mag clamps. Now, this is actually one of the systems that I would absolutely take just a rank in Death's Head for so many reasons. High stress mag clamps is a 1-point system, which is pretty good, and it allows your mech to treat any flat surface as the ground for the purpose of movement. It allows you to essentially climb on any flat surface or without needing to make climb checks at your full speed. Though if you ever fall prone, you do fall. Now, it says only for the purpose of movement, though I don't know if it means you can stop and just like hang on the side of a building. That's what I would think that would be the intent, right? But it says only for the purpose of movement. But then it mentions specifically, although you begin to fall if you are knocked prone. So unless you're knocked prone on your turn for some reason, I think that's very strange. I do think, and with the intent of mag clamps specifically, I do think that you can just remain stationary on the side of a building, which is honestly really cool, and it's one of the few ways this mech can prevent other enemies from getting too close, though it does require, oh no, it's all solid surfaces as flat ground. So yeah, as long as you have a pretty sturdy surface to be on, like the side of a building or a cave wall or something, this is a really good way to stay out of harm's way. Though as with anything that increases your elevation, it's also going to make you more vulnerable to taking damage. So that being the case, you need to use this one sparingly, but I do thoroughly like this one. And like I said, for a single point, this is a really good one for a lot of mechs. Even if you're doing a melee mech, this is a really good way to get up on those annoying mechs that like to station up on high ground or buildings to make it easier to take them down. So high stress mag clamps for a rank 1 system is pretty good. Tracking bug is also a really good rank 1 system. Again, majorly benefiting those who decide to take even just 1 point in Death's Head. Now, it's 2 systems, so not as cool as Mag Clamps, but also pretty fun. This is a quick tech action you can get. Any character within sensor range, you make a tech attack, and on hit, you know their exact location. You also get all their stats, their HP, current structure, and speed for the duration. Now, they can't hide, and you ignore their invisible status if they ever get it. And to remove this tracking drone, they must succeed on an engineering check as a quick action. Otherwise, it deactivates at the end of the scene. This is very good, and because it's a quick tech, there is a lot of ways this can be blended into your normal round of fire. Quick, tracking bug skirmish every round, essentially, to hit a lot of enemies and to get all their stats, making them more vulnerable to you, and as well preventing them from doing things like becoming invisible or the like. This is a very good general feature if you're not planning on using a lot of full barrage, which honestly I would with the Death's Head specifically. But if there's any round where you're not planning on doing that, this is not a bad one to throw in, and it's also really good. Anytime you can get information on HP and speed stats specifically are always really good. In addition to that as well, this also super benefits the artillery style if you're using any kind of, arcing weapon, as the enemies can't use structures and hide from you to prevent you from tracking onto them. And it says any character within sensor range, and it doesn't say line of sight. So even if an enemy is not within line of sight, as long as you know they're there, this can be used on them, which is very, very powerful. All right, rank 2, along with the Death's Head mech, we also get the Vulture DMR, probably my favorite DMR in the game. Its range is massive. It does a d6 plus 1 damage, which is actually pretty good. And it's accurate, which is nuts, because that plus 1 accuracy stacks with the Death's Head ability to get plus 1 on their rolls. So not only do you roll an additional d6 and add it to your stat, but you also get the plus 1 from your Death's Head, making this an insanely good pickup for the Death's Head. And it's a main rifle. So it can be stacked with another long distance aux weapon on your main aux mount, giving you a very devastatingly powerful skirmish. And it has overkill. Now, the only problem with it is it has heat 1 to self after you shoot the gun. That is not the worst. You have to be careful if there's any enemies who are using things that heat your mech up, though, obviously. So investing in some engineering is probably going to be recommended if you're going to use the Vulture DMR. But there's so many ways to easily get rid of heat in this game that honestly, if you really want to go whole hog on the Vulture DMR, you're going to be pretty safe. Now, it also has overkill, which means that its minimum damage is always going to be 3. And, because it's a d6 plus 1, so it's 2 plus that 1, 3 damage, minimum damage as long as you're hitting the enemy mech. And if you're in your mark for death mode, if you crit, this will do 2d6 additional damage. It's a really strong mech. And it's when you're rolling damage with this weapon, any damage dice, that means the extra damage will also be subjected to overkill. Again, potentially overheating your mech, so invest in engineering, but a very, very good range weapon. And I just love when these licenses come with weapons in them, because they're usually all really sick. All right, Core Siphon, perfect for the Death's Head and perfect for any ranged mech you're using. For just 2 system points, you can activate as a protocol a Core Siphon where you start ciphering from your mech core to your ranged weapons, giving you a +1 accuracy on your first attack roll in the round, but you do receive a +1 difficulty in all other attack rolls until the end of the turn. Now, this is a protocol you'd have to do every round, so obviously this cannot be blended in with some other very useful protocol actions. But if you decide that you're really going to just lay it on in a round, this is a really solid protocol. And this +1 accuracy stacks again with the neuro targeting from the Death's Head, making your mech insanely accurate and highly likely to crit. So, that being the case, Core Siphon fits the Death's Heads perfectly and is good for any artillery mech who is focused on single hit, probably massive weapon, like super heavy weapon type of mechs. All right, rank 3, we get the heavy rifle for the Death's Head, or at least for its mounts. This is the Railgun. Railguns are always really cool. This is also a 20 hex line, which is nuts. If any 2 enemies are lined up without, any kind of massive cover blocking them, this is going to do a lot of damage. It's also armor piercing, and it does a d6 +4, which is pretty good for a heavy weapon, all things in consideration. And when you use the Mark for Death on an enemy, this could do potentially 3d6 additional damage on a crit. Now, the armor piercing is huge because armor piercing is one of those things that can really get in the way of your long range mechs dealing with other mechs, as your high damage oftentimes gets nerfed to an average character's damage. So your range is only a defensive tool rather than offensive tool. This is very good with the armor piercing. Now, it does have ordnance. So besides protocols, this must be the first thing you use in a round before you move. Not a huge deal more often than not, but it can be a bit of a headache when you're using Mark for Death, as if the enemy closes that 5-foot range, or that 5 hex range. Don't know why I keep saying 5 foot. That 5 hex range, then you're not going to get your critical damage, and if you do fire with this gun, you're going to miss out, which is very unfortunate. But other than that, it's not too terrible. Now, the 2 heat is also pretty big, but if you're not using this every round, it's not going to be that big of a problem. And you may just have to stabilize yourself every other round or every third round or something when using this, which is, not terrible. Honestly, there's a lot of mechs that use very high heat, like stabilized rotations. So this can just deal a lot of damage. And the Railgun really tops the Death's Head off, especially for a full barrage, as this can be full barraged with the Vulture DMR, dealing 3 heat to yourself, which is actually kind of nuts, but you do in the end a minimum of, let's see, that's 1d6 +1, and it has overkill, so 3 damage, and then this one has a minimum of 5 damage. And this is a line, so this one can hit multiple enemies. So if it's a singular enemy, you do 8 damage on a full barrage, and more for each additional enemy that you hit in that line, 5 more. A very powerful heavy rifle, and one that a lot of mechs, I'm sure, are going to be hungry for. So if you're going Death's Head anyway, this is just a good add-on even for other styles of artillery mechs. And for the last system here in rank 3, and the last thing you pick up with the Death's Head, we have the Kinetic Compensator, a very good 2-point system, because if you miss with a range attack, your next range attack will get a +1 accuracy. Really good for your main aux mounts, because this will allow you to get accuracy if you miss with your first strike. Actually, forgive me, because this is kind of my noovishness when it comes to Lancer. Do main ox mounts count as a singular attack, or is it because whenever you use a main ox and you skirmish with it, you can fire with your main mount and your auxiliary mount, and they can target, I think, different targets, or maybe it's just the same target. I'm not sure. But would the auxiliary in that benefit from this, or would it they both require a first round one, which we had earlier? I'm actually not sure. Let me know in the comments below how that works exactly. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who know. I could look it up right now, but I'm feeling a little lazy, honestly. In any regard, more accuracy, more ways to make your first round really count. And I do think there's a talent line very specifically orientated around your first shot in a round doing a bunch of damage. So yeah, Death's Head is a very clean mech and has very clean build paths to make it very powerful. And that's going to be it for this video. This is a really good artillery mech. Honestly, super solid. Its rank 1 is a very solid pickup. So even if you're not interested in the Vulture's DMR or the Death's Head frame, just getting 1 rank in Death's Head is going to give you a lot of decent benefits. And this is probably the best style of mech for just sniper play in the game. So if you really enjoy snipers, this is probably going to be one of the ones for you. Now, there will be another video tomorrow, which I'm sure the Pathfinder fans will be a little unhappy that there's 2 Lancer videos in a row, but that's just how it's been. Tomorrow, we're going to be getting into the Goblin. So if you like to gobble some enemies up, gobble these nuts, this is going to be a fun one. The Goblin's a very fun, tricky little mech, and one of the ultimate hackers in the game. It's going to be a fun one. And if you made it through this part of the video, please leave a like, subscribe to see more content like this. I'm doing Lancer content and all kinds of other tabletop content, not just the main games. So this is going to be the place to be. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.